The sea air hit Adrian Blake like a memory that had grown sharper in his absence, briny, wind-slicked, and nostalgic in the way only a place tied to childhood could be. The moment he stepped out of the taxi, duffel slung over one shoulder, he felt it. Something was wrong. The view of the cliffside looked the same. The ocean still thundered below in its tireless rhythm, but the villa, his villa, had changed. The wrought iron gate was padlocked. His breath caught in his throat. He stood motionless, gazing up at the villa perched on the hill like a secret too long kept. Blake House, as it had once been called, had always been more than a home. It was a symbol, his grandmother's legacy, the one place he could truly call his. Every creaking stair and sun-drenched window had held pieces of his childhood. Now, the windows were shuttered. The garden was overgrown, left to rot under months of neglect. Weeds choked the stone path that once led visitors up through blooming lavender and wild thyme. And that damned lock. Adrian climbed over the gate, his breath ragged, his hands shaking with each rung. Something primal twisted in his gut. The kind of knowing that doesn't require proof. The kind you feel in your bones before it reaches your mind. They'd taken it from him. The confrontation happened that evening, in his parents' cold, sterile dining room. The table gleamed with untouched polish. His mother, Angela, sat like a porcelain figure at the head, stiff, composed. His father, Richard, leaned against the wall, arms folded, as if bracing for impact. "You sold it?" Adrian's voice cracked. "Without even telling me?" Angela's eyes fluttered toward Richard. A pause. Too long. "It wasn't being used," she said carefully. "We thought... No, you didn't think, you decided," Adrian cut in. His fists trembled at his sides. "That villa was mine. Grandma left it to me." His father exhaled, avoiding his gaze. "Your sister needed help." Adrian froze. "Vivian?" His brow furrowed. "What kind of help costs that much?" Neither of them answered. That same silence again. Thick, sour, coiled like a living thing in the room. Angela finally spoke, her voice low. "She was in trouble. A lot of trouble." "What kind of trouble?" he demanded. Still, no answer. Angela picked at the edge of a napkin, her gaze fixed downward. "It's done, Adrian. You can't change it." The room fell into a silence that hummed with tension. Adrian looked between them, his father's rigid jaw, his mother's trembling hands. Something didn't add up. This wasn't guilt. It was fear. He stepped back, feeling the weight of 1,000 questions pressing against his ribs. "Who bought it?" Richard exchanged a brief glance with his wife. Angela spoke quietly. "A man named Lucien Marek. Said he had personal ties to the house. Claimed to be a distant relative." Adrian's stomach twisted. "That's a lie. I'd know if we had relatives, especially ones with that kind of money." "You've been gone a long time," Richard muttered. "You don't know what's been happening." Adrian's voice rose. "Then tell me. Because right now, it looks like you sold off the one thing that mattered. For a sister who's been a mess for years, and you're acting like it's just... unfortunate." Angela stood then, too suddenly, her chair scraping the wood floor. Her eyes were glassy. "We did what we had to do." "For what?" he whispered. "To save her or protect yourselves?" The air shifted. Richard's posture stiffened further, and for a split second, barely perceptible, his mother flinched. There it was. The fear. They weren't protecting Vivian. They were afraid of something else. Adrian didn't wait for their answer. He turned on his heel and stormed out, the front door slamming behind him like a thunderclap. Outside, the night had fallen heavy. Wind whipped through the trees as he stared down the dark road leading back to the sea. The villa wasn't just stolen, it had been surrendered. But why? And to who? Whatever the truth was, Adrian knew one thing with searing certainty. He wouldn't stop until he got it back. And he had a terrible feeling that the villa wasn't just sold to a stranger. It had been given to something else. The sun hadn't yet broken the morning haze when Adrian stood before the villa again. He'd barely slept, his mind looping with questions, with shadows of things left unsaid. The gate, still padlocked, now had a fresh chain woven through the iron bars. This time, a small security camera blinked above the archway, its mechanical eye tracking him as he approached. He wasn't just unwelcome, he was being watched. Adrian scaled the gate again, more defiant this time, and landed with a soft crunch onto the gravel. The villa loomed ahead, a silhouette of peeling grandeur. Its shutters were bolted shut, sections of the veranda were draped with heavy black plastic. The once glorious stained glass above the front door had been replaced by solid steel plating. It didn't look like a home anymore, it looked like a fortress. He made his way around the perimeter, his fingers brushing the flaking white paint of the outer wall. Through one window, he caught a glimpse of motion, shadows flickering across a hallway he once knew by heart. Then another movement. Closer. A man. Tall. Pale. Dressed in black. Watching him through the window, before disappearing just as quickly. That was the first time Adrian saw him. Lucien Marek. Adrian returned the next day with a plan. No more sneaking. He marched to the front door and rang the bell. It echoed like a church bell in a tomb. He waited. After a long moment, the door opened, but only halfway. A man in a tailored charcoal gray suit stepped out, blocking the entrance. His face was hollow, his cheekbones sharp, and his skin pale like polished ivory. But it was his eyes that unsettled Adrian most. Flat, gray, and completely devoid of warmth. "Mr. Merrick does not take visitors," the man said. Adrian stepped forward. "Tell him Adrian Blake is here. This house used to be mine." "No longer." The door began to close. Adrian wedged his foot between it. "I don't want trouble. I just want answers. Why did he buy this house? What does he want with it?" The man's mouth curled slightly. Not quite a smirk, more like a twitch. He wants what has always been his. The door slammed shut, fast and final. Over the next several days, Adrian made repeated attempts to reach Lucien. Each time, he was intercepted by more of the same, unmarked black vans parked outside, silent men who wouldn't speak, locked gates, and the persistent hum of security systems newly installed. On the fourth evening, Adrian waited until sunset and slipped through a break in the garden wall. He moved carefully, heart pounding as he stepped into the tangled ruins of his grandmother's once prized garden. The rosemary bushes were dying. The rose trellis had collapsed. What once bloomed with wild color was now gray and brittle. He crept toward the back veranda when a faint sound stopped him. Soft humming, a woman's voice. Melancholy, lilting, almost like a lullaby. He crouched behind a broken column and watched as a housemaid emerged, hanging damp linens on a line. Her hair was tied tightly in a scarf, and her posture was rigid, unnaturally so. Adrian stepped out slowly. "Excuse me," he said gently. The woman turned fast, startled. Her eyes were wide with something that wasn't just fear, it was panic. "You shouldn't be here," she hissed in a low voice. "He sees everything." "I just want to talk to him," Adrian whispered. "Lucien, why won't he talk to me?" She shook her head. "He doesn't speak with outsiders. Not once he's claimed the house." Adrian's brows drew together. "Claimed it? What do you mean? Who is he?" The maid leaned closer, her voice trembling. "Not who. What? This house? It remembers him. It let him back in." Adrian blinked. "Let him back? Leave," she said urgently, glancing over her shoulder. "Leave now, before you see what he's hiding." And then she was gone, disappearing through the side door like smoke in the wind. Adrian stood frozen in the dying light, heart hammering. Something about the way she said it, the warning, had pierced through his anger, right into his gut. There was a truth beneath her fear. A deeper wrongness buried within these walls. This wasn't just about a stolen home anymore. This was about something that had returned. Something that didn't want to be disturbed. something that had been waiting. The rain came without warning. Adrian trudged up the slick driveway toward his temporary rental on the far end of the bluff. The sky above split with low, growling thunder. His boots left muddy tracks on the tile floor as he entered the foyer, shaking the water from his hair. He'd spent another fruitless day trying to reach Lucien Marek. Calls unanswered, confrontations blocked, doors closed in his face. He was beginning to wonder if the man even lived in the villa, or if he simply haunted it. Exhausted and soaked, he nearly missed it. A faint tapping sound, papery, soft, coming from outside again. He turned, paused, and opened the front door once more. A single envelope sat in the rusted mailbox at the foot of the drive. No stamp, no name. Just a white paper, folded in half and fluttering like a dying bird in the wind. He reached for it cautiously. When he unfolded the note, the ink was smeared at the corners by moisture, but the message was still clear, scrawled in frantic, jagged handwriting. They shouldn't have sold it. She's still in the walls. Adrian stood frozen, the wind tearing the note from his fingers. He lunged to catch it, pressing it to his chest, heart racing. She's still in the walls? Who? Was it some deranged warning? A prank? Or was it connected to the maid's whispered fear? That night, Adrian couldn't sleep. He sat at the small desk in the rented cottage, staring at the letter for hours. Something about the way it was written, uneven, desperate, almost childlike, struck him deeply. It wasn't just a message. It was a confession. The next morning, Adrian returned to the villa grounds under the pretense of making a final attempt to meet Lucien. But he had a different goal in mind. He remembered the name of the old caretaker who had served his family for decades. Emery Thatch, a quiet man with silver hair and a limp who'd known every inch of the house. He'd retired, supposedly just before Adrian left for his sabbatical. He found Emery living in a rundown cottage near the docks, sitting on a bench feeding gulls stale bread. He looked older, worn in a way that couldn't be measured by years alone. "I was wondering when you'd come," Emery said before Adrian even spoke. Adrian sat beside him, the crumpled letter in hand. "You know about this?" Adrian asked. The old man nodded slowly, eyes never leaving the horizon. "I knew someone would find it eventually. The house doesn't keep secrets forever." "What does it mean? Who's she?" Emery hesitated. "They told me not to speak of her. Your grandmother made us swear, me, the housekeeper, the groundskeeper, all of us. Said it was for everyone's safety." "Safety from what, Emery?" The old man finally looked at him then, and Adrian saw it. Genuine, bone-deep fear. "I stayed quiet for years, Adrian, but I knew this day would come. Selling that house, it disturbed something. It was never meant to change hands again." Adrian pressed him. "Is there someone in the walls? Living? Trapped?" But Emery only shook his head. "She's not alive. Not like you think. But she's not dead either. That house kept her sealed. We maintained it, kept it quiet. We did what we were told. Until it got sold to him. Lucien." Emery's voice cracked as he whispered, "You need to be careful, son. There are things in that house that remember you. Things that don't forget blood." Adrian left with more questions than answers. That evening, he visited his sister Vivian's apartment. She had been avoiding him since his return, always claiming she was too tired, not feeling well, or in a dark place again. He'd chalked it up to her usual emotional cycles. But when she opened the door, he was stunned by her appearance. Vivian looked gaunt, her eyes were shadowed, her cheeks hollow. She wore a heavy sweater despite the warm air. The apartment was dim, curtains drawn tight. The air smelled of lavender and something faintly sour, like mildew and metal. "I didn't think you'd come," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I've been trying to. You're the one who disappears," Adrian replied, stepping inside. Vivian hesitated before shutting the door. "Do you hear it?" she asked softly, barely above a whisper. "Hear what?" She touched her temple, eyes darting toward the closed window. "The voice. At night. It calls to me." Adrian stared at her. "Vivian, What are you talking about? It says I left her behind. That she's angry, that I have to come back. Finish what they started. A chill rippled down Adrian's spine. Vivian began to tremble. I think I made a mistake. I thought paying them would make it stop. But it didn't. It just unleashed something. She turned to him, her eyes wide and glassy. You don't understand, Adrian. She remembers us. She remembers me. And then she said it. The name. Elise. Adrian felt the blood drain from his face. He didn't know who Elise was, but somehow, he knew. She had never truly left the house. Adrian stood alone in his grandmother's study, now gathering dust in the upper floor of his parents' house. It smelled of old leather, dried ink, and time. The room had always been off-limits growing up, part shrine, part mystery. Its mahogany shelves still held her journals, antique books on genealogy, coastal folklore, and architecture. Some titles were in Latin, others in languages Adrian couldn't even begin to decipher. He hadn't intended to come here. He'd left Vivian's place with a storm in his chest and nowhere to direct it. But something about the name Elise, whispered like a curse from his sister's cracked lips, had pushed him here. His grandmother had known something. Of that, he was sure. He sat at her old writing desk, opening drawer after drawer until he found a bundle of correspondence tied with twine. Letters from lawyers. Estate documents. One stood out, on embossed paper bearing the seal of Rafferty and Blackthorne, the firm that had managed her will. Adrian read through the letter slowly. The official will had supposedly been filed a year before her death, leaving everything, including the villa, to him. But the document referenced in this letter wasn't the same one that had been read to the family after the funeral. That version had disinherited him completely. Adrian's stomach turned. It was forged. He left the house within minutes, barely saying a word to his mother as he passed her in the hallway. She called after him, but he didn't stop. His rage gave him purpose now, and it carried him all the way to the city, to the stark glass offices of Rafferty and Blackthorne. He didn't have an appointment, but when he mentioned his grandmother's name, he was ushered into a private room by a paralegal who looked as if she'd seen a ghost. The senior partner, Mr. Blackthorne, entered minutes later, stoic, pale, but professional. He greeted Adrian with a heavy sigh, as though he'd been dreading this moment. I take it this isn't a social call, Blackthorne said, sitting across from him. I want the original will, Adrian said. The lawyer hesitated. I'm afraid I can't. You can, Adrian interrupted. And you will. I know it exists. I've read the correspondence. There was a legal transfer of the villa to me. And then suddenly it's not mine. Something happened. Something you helped cover up. Blackthorne didn't deny it. Instead, he leaned back, steepled his fingers, and studied Adrian with tired eyes. Your grandmother was a complicated woman, Mr. Blake. She understood the weight of legacy, especially in a house like that. She believed certain responsibilities came with bloodlines. Adrian leaned forward. What responsibilities? The lawyer's silence was a confirmation in itself. Finally, Blackthorne opened his drawer and retrieved a weathered folder. He slid it across the desk. This is the original will, unaltered. You were the sole heir. But a week before her death, we were contacted by your parents. A new will was submitted, signed, witnessed. Everything checked out. We filed it, despite our doubts. Adrian opened the file, eyes scanning the old, yellowed paper. There it was, her signature, the seal, but it felt wrong, like it had been traced through centuries of dust. She didn't change it, Adrian murmured. Blackthorne nodded solemnly. I suspected the same, but I was told to let it go. Told by who? The man hesitated again, then whispered, the order. Adrian blinked. The Order of Thorns? The name left a taste in his mouth like rust and rot. Vivian had mentioned them in passing. A secret society. Ritualistic. Powerful. Adrian always thought it was one of her wild delusions. But, seeing Blackthorne's face now, They've been involved with your family for generations, the lawyer said. Guardians of something old, something buried in that house. Adrian's throat tightened. Is that what this is about? They wanted the house? They wanted what's in it, Blackthorne replied, and they couldn't risk you interfering. Later that night, Adrian sat alone in the rental cottage, thumbing through his grandmother's old, leather-bound diary he'd taken from the study. Its pages were mostly mundane: memories, daily weather reports, comments about the tides, the roses in bloom, until he reached the section marked with a red ribbon. The handwriting shifted, shaky, urgent. The door under the floorboards must remain sealed. Even Lucien doesn't understand the risk. Elise stirs in her sleep, whispering through the wood. I hear her sometimes at night. I don't know what the order did to her, but she is no longer my daughter. She is something else now. And the house feeds her memory. Adrian's blood ran cold, beneath the villa. Under the floorboards, a secret chamber. The letter, the maid, Vivian, Emery. Everything was pointing to something hidden deep in the bones of the house, something his family had kept buried, and something Lucien was now unearthing. He turned to the last page of the diary, where his grandmother had scrawled just 2 words in large quivering ink. Forgive me. The more Adrian tried to uncover Lucien Marek, the more he began to suspect the man didn't legally exist. No property records before the villa, no bank trails, no digital footprint, no birth certificate under that name. It was as if Lucien had appeared out of the mist, the same way the house had begun to darken, without warning, but with terrible certainty. And yet, everyone acted like he'd always been there. Adrian spent days combing through the town's archives and his grandmother's private journals, connecting brittle newspaper clippings with names he barely remembered. He found Marek's mentioned only once, in a decades-old scandal buried at the bottom of the town's microfilm database. Mysterious disappearance at Blake House, 1973. The article was barely 2 paragraphs long, detailing a missing infant, a woman presumed dead, and no conclusive evidence. Adrian recognized the name immediately. Esther Marek, his grandmother's estranged twin sister. A woman whispered about in hushed tones at family gatherings, if she was mentioned at all. She had disappeared before Adrian was even born. He had grown up believing Esther had died young, lost to some long-forgotten illness. But the records painted a more disturbing picture. Esther had once lived in the villa. She had a son. And then, nothing. As if the earth had swallowed them whole. Adrian sat at the docks the next morning, staring out at the restless sea, the wind clawing at his coat. His thoughts ran in loops, circling a name that now echoed louder with each beat of his heart. Lucien, a man claiming to be a distant heir. A man who never left the house. A man the villa had let back in, according to the maid. What if Lucien wasn't some outsider at all? What if he was Esther's son? That would make him his cousin. The realization chilled him to the core. But more than that, it explained something he hadn't wanted to admit. Why Lucien felt familiar. The way he moved. The shape of his face. Something deep in Adrian's blood recognized him. But if that was true, it opened darker questions. Why had Lucien returned? And what had he come to finish? By late afternoon, Adrian stood once more outside the villa's rusting iron gate, rain soaking through his collar. This time, he didn't try to break in. He simply waited, glaring up at the shuttered windows, daring the house to acknowledge him. To his surprise, the gate clicked open with a mechanical whir. No guard appeared. The front door was ajar. Adrian stepped through the threshold slowly, heart pounding in his ears. The interior was dim and suffocating. Covered furniture loomed like ghosts, and plastic sheets crinkled under his boots. The air smelled of mold, damp wood, and something far older, something coppery. The house groaned as he moved deeper. Then he saw him. Lucien stood at the end of the corridor, half lit by the orange flicker of a single candle. He wore a dark, 3-piece suit, and his pale skin seemed to drink the shadows around him. His expression was unreadable. I was beginning to wonder when you'd figure it out. Lucien said, his voice low and smooth. Adrian felt a dry laugh catch in his throat. You're her son, aren't you? Esther's. Lucien tilted his head slightly. Esther Marek. Yes, though I was never given her name. She died before I was old enough to speak. Then why are you here? Adrian demanded. Why this house? Why now? Lucien stepped closer, but not threateningly, almost mournfully. Because this house was never yours. It was promised long before you were born. Promised to those who understood its purpose. My mother was cast out for refusing that purpose. She tried to free us. She failed. Adrian's hands clenched at his sides. You bought it to take it back? Lucien's expression darkened. Not to take it back. To contain what your family could no longer control. He gestured toward the staircase. They sealed her below, Adrian. They buried the truth. Your grandmother, your parents, the order, they all made a deal. And now the deal is breaking. The walls are thinning. Elise is waking. Adrian's breath hitched. Elise? He repeated. Vivian said that name. Lucien's eyes flashed. Of course she did. Elise remembers all of you. The blood, the betrayal, the silence. He stepped even closer, until they stood just feet apart. You think I'm the threat, Lucien said quietly. But I'm the last defense you have left. Adrian's voice trembled. Defense against what? Lucien turned his head slightly, as if listening to something far away. Something in the walls. She's hungry, Adrian, and the house is feeding her again. With that, he turned and disappeared into the darkened hall, the candlelight fading behind him until it vanished altogether. Adrian stood frozen, breath shallow, heart racing. He hadn't just lost the villa. He'd inherited a legacy soaked in secrets, blood, and something beneath the floor that no one dared name. And now the question was no longer who Lucien was. It was whether Adrian was prepared to become the very thing his grandmother had tried to keep him from becoming. A guardian. Or a sacrifice. The heavy rain that had haunted the coast for days had finally ceased, but the lingering dampness seemed to seep into Adrian's bones as he sat in the cramped cafe downtown, across from an aging historian named Margaret. She was one of the few locals who still whispered about the Order of Thorns, a secret society rumored to wield power over the town for generations, cloaked in shadow and myth. Vivian's debts weren't financial, Margaret told him in a low voice, sliding a faded, leather-bound ledger across the table. The money she owed? That was just the surface. What she owed in blood? Well, that's a different kind of debt entirely. Adrian's fingers trembled as he opened the ledger, the yellowed pages filled with names, dates, and cryptic annotations that seemed to mark sacrifices and oaths rather than payments. This is tied to my family? He asked, disbelief mingling with dread. Margaret nodded. Your ancestors made a pact centuries ago. The Order of Thorns was born from desperation. A deal forged in darkness to protect the town and their bloodline from a curse that was never fully understood. In return, every generation was bound to serve, to sacrifice, and to keep the villa. And what lay beneath? Sealed. Adrian swallowed hard. And Vivian? What was she supposed to do? Repay the blood debt. Not with money, but with herself. You see, the Order demands more than loyalty. It demands sacrifice to maintain the balance. Vivian's debts were really a payment on that ancient promise. When your parents sold the villa, they thought they could buy time. They were wrong. The truth settled over Adrian like a shroud. His sister hadn't been a reckless spender drowning in loans. She had been trapped, used as a pawn in a game older than the town itself. Later that evening, Adrian confronted his parents again. The weight of the ledger felt like a stone in his pocket as he paced the familiar but cold family living room. Why didn't you tell me about the order? He demanded, voice sharp but breaking. Angela's eyes welled with tears, and Richard looked away, jaw clenched. We wanted to protect you, his mother whispered. You were away. We hoped the debt would never come due while you were gone. But Vivian? Adrian's anger flared. You sacrificed her without a word. She volunteered, Richard said grimly. She thought she could end it, for all of us. Adrian shook his head in disbelief. What does that even mean? What did she agree to? Before they could answer, his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number flashed across the screen. Stop digging, or your sister becomes the next sacrifice. The air in the room froze. In the days that followed, Adrian watched Vivian closely. The woman he remembered was fading, replaced by someone haunted and fragile. She spoke less, her eyes darting nervously as if shadows whispered secrets no one else could hear. One night, Adrian heard her talking in her sleep. Come back. Finish the binding. The debt is never paid. He approached her trembling figure, reaching out. Vivian, what's happening to you? She opened eyes glazed with a strange light, and whispered, I hear her, Elise. She's calling me back to the villa, to complete what our bloodline started. The villa, the secret chamber, the Order's curse. All of it crashed down on Adrian's shoulders. If Vivian was the key to their survival, what did that mean for him? And how long before the past they tried to bury dragged them all into darkness? Adrian's nights had grown restless. His dreams were haunted by shadows slipping through cracked plaster and whispers echoing from the deep recesses of the villa's foundations. Every creak of the old house, every draft that swept through the night seemed alive with secrets begging to be uncovered. He had to know the truth. The cryptic message, she's still in the walls, had echoed relentlessly in his mind. His grandmother's diary had hinted at something locked away beneath the floorboards, a secret chamber sealed for a reason that no one dared explain. Now, with Vivian's condition worsening and Lucien's obsession growing darker, Adrian knew he couldn't wait any longer. That afternoon, Adrian returned to the villa under cover of gray skies, a heavy storm threatening to break. The security cameras still tracked his every move, but the servants had grown less vigilant after weeks of his persistence. A narrow window near the servants' entrance, partially concealed by overgrown ivy, provided his entry. Inside, the house was suffocating. Draped furniture, sealed windows, and shadows that seemed to reach for him like living fingers. He navigated the narrow hallways, following the vague clues his grandmother had left behind. Then, in the heart of the villa's ground floor, he found it. A heavy wooden panel, nearly indistinguishable from the floorboards surrounding it. The edges were worn, but marked with faint carvings, symbols he recognized from his grandmother's diary, signs meant to bind and contain. His hands trembled as he pried the panel loose. Beneath lay a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The air was thick with damp earth and something faintly metallic, a scent like rust and old. Adrian's flashlight cut through the black as he descended, each step groaning beneath his weight. The stairs opened into a cramped chamber, bare stone walls slick with moisture and marked with strange, almost ritualistic scratches. In the center was a small, barred window, too high to reach, but it offered a glimpse into a narrow, claustrophobic corridor. The walls themselves seemed to pulse, as if alive, and then he heard it. A soft, shuddering breath, a faint rustle, a whisper. Turning slowly, Adrian's light landed on a figure, a girl, or something that once had been a girl, crouched in the shadows. Her skin was pale as moonlight, stretched taut over brittle bones. Her tangled hair fell over hollow eyes that shone with unnatural intelligence. She was both terrifying and pitiful. Elise, Adrian whispered. The name hung heavy in the stale air. She looked up, her gaze locking with his. There was something ancient and broken in those eyes, an echo of the woman his grandmother once was, twisted by whatever dark force had claimed her daughter. You shouldn't be here, Elise croaked, her voice a brittle rasp. Adrian stepped closer, heart pounding. Why are you here? Why did they lock you away? A hollow laugh escaped her lips. Because I am the curse, the debt, the blood they tried to bury. I am the price they never wanted to pay. She spoke of a failed ritual, a desperate attempt to contain the darkness she'd become. The Order had hidden her, sealed her inside these walls, feeding her shadow and silence for decades. "Vivian is next," Elise said, voice trembling with something that might have been regret or hunger. "They sold me away to wake her, to finish what was started." Adrian's breath caught. "You have to stop it," she whispered, "or the house will swallow you too." Back above, Adrian stumbled from the hidden chamber, the weight of Elise's words sinking into his bones. The villa was no longer just a building. It was a living prison, a tomb of secrets and sacrifices. And with Lucien tightening his grip, with Vivian's soul fraying under the curse's pull, Adrian realized the nightmare was only beginning. The walls had ears. And now, so did the shadows. The villa seemed alive in the twilight, its shadows stretching long and dark as the sun slipped beneath the horizon. Adrian felt the weight of the house pressing in on him, as if the walls themselves were closing ranks. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind through broken shutters, sounded like a warning. Lucien had been waiting. For weeks, Adrian had watched him move through the house with a single-minded purpose, eyes burning with a quiet obsession that chilled him to his core. Now the truth was clear. Lucien wasn't here to reclaim ownership. He was here to complete a ritual, a terrible, ancient rite that had been interrupted decades ago. And Vivian was at the heart of it. Adrian found her in the dim light of the drawing room, pale and distant, eyes glazed with a strange, unnatural calm. She barely recognized him. "They're calling," she whispered. "The voices from beneath the walls. Elise, she's waking." Lucien appeared then, silent as a shadow, his presence filling the room with a cold intensity. "The ritual must be finished," he said quietly. "Vivian is the vessel. She will bind Elise and keep the curse contained." Adrian's chest tightened. "No, you're going to use her. Sacrifice her." Lucien's eyes gleamed. "Sacrifice? No, Adrian. It is a binding, a renewal. Without it, the darkness consumes us all." Vivian's lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came. Her fingers trembled, reaching toward the sealed chamber beneath the villa. Adrian knew what he had to do: stop the ritual, save his sister, and destroy whatever nightmare had been unleashed. He raced to the hidden stairwell, descending into the cold, damp darkness. The walls seemed to pulse, alive with unseen power. Flickering candlelight lined the chamber, arranged in symbols Adrian recognized from his grandmother's diary, sigils meant to hold back evil. At the center lay an ancient altar, stained with time and shadow. Elise's hollow eyes watched from the corner, a twisted specter trapped between worlds. Lucien followed, chanting softly in a language Adrian couldn't understand. The air grew thick with energy, crackling and electric. Vivian stood at the edge of the altar, her body trembling as the voices called louder. Adrian reached out, grabbing her hand. "Vivian, fight it! You're stronger than this." But the curse was relentless. Vivian's eyes flashed black, her voice merging with Elise's whisper. "It's not me anymore. It's her." The ritual reached its crescendo as Lucien raised a ceremonial dagger, the blade gleaming with unnatural light. The room pulsed, the walls seeming to breathe. Adrian faced a terrible choice: let the ritual finish and risk losing his sister forever, or stop it and risk unleashing the darkness trapped for generations. With a cry, Adrian lunged, knocking the dagger aside. The clash shattered the fragile balance. A blinding light erupted, and the villa shook as if torn between two worlds. Elise's scream echoed through the chamber, mingling with Vivian's cries. Lucien grasped Adrian's arm, eyes wild. "You don't understand! Without the binding, everything is lost!" But Adrian's resolve was unshakable. "I'm not letting this curse win." The struggle tore through the night. Shadows writhed and shifted, the air thick with ancient power. Adrian fought not just for his sister, but for the legacy of a family cursed by its own past. When dawn finally broke, the villa was silent. Vivian lay unconscious, but alive. Lucien was gone. And the walls, they held their secrets once more. The walls of the family home seemed colder now, as if the villa's curse had seeped into every corner of Adrian's world. After the harrowing ritual beneath the villa, nothing felt safe anymore. Shadows lurked in the edges of his vision, and every whispered conversation carried an undercurrent of secrets waiting to erupt. Adrian's mind was a storm of questions as he stormed into the dimly lit living room, where his parents sat with faces drawn tight by guilt and fear. "It's time," Adrian said, voice low but fierce. "You need to tell me everything. No more lies." His mother's eyes flickered with sorrow. His father's jaw tightened as he exchanged a glance with her. Richard finally spoke, voice heavy. "We wanted to protect you, for years, but the truth is darker than you imagine." Adrian's heart pounded. "Then start talking," Angela began, her voice trembling. "We were part of the order from the beginning, the sacrifices, the bindings. It was our bloodline that held the curse at bay. Your grandmother's will was forged not just to protect the villa, but to protect you." Adrian shook his head. "Then why, Vivian? Why didn't you tell me I was the true heir?" His mother's tears spilled freely now. "Because the prophecy named you as the sacrifice, the one who was supposed to bind the curse forever. But your father and I, we couldn't bear to lose you. So we switched the names in the prophecy. We told the order Vivian was the chosen." The room spun in Adrian's head. "You lied to me. To yourself," he said, voice cracking. "You doomed my sister." Richard's face was grim. "We thought we could control it. We thought the house would keep the darkness contained." "But it didn't. No," Angela whispered. "The house knows. Elise knows. And now she's coming for all of us." Adrian's breath hitched as a cold draft swept through the room, as if the house itself was listening. He realized then that the betrayal wasn't just his parents. It was blood deep, woven through generations. Every secret, every sacrifice had been a thread in a dark tapestry that was unraveling before his eyes. Outside, the wind howled like a warning. The sky above the villa was a furious swirl of dark clouds, as if the heavens themselves mourned the night's approaching storm. Adrian stood at the edge of the estate, the weight of everything, family, secrets, curses, pressing down like a leaden cloak. The villa loomed before him, blackened windows staring like hollow eyes. Smoke curled from its chimneys, the scent of burning wood mingling with something far older and far darker. Tonight, the house would die, or so Adrian hoped. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. Lucien, pale and resolute, stood by the ancient altar in the hidden chamber, his eyes gleaming with grim determination. Vivian, her skin ghostly, her eyes still flickering with the remnants of Elise's torment, lay restrained but defiant, caught between two worlds. Adrian's parents waited near the front door, shadows of their former selves. Regret and fear tangled in their expressions as they watched their son prepare for the final act. "This is it," Adrian said, voice steady despite the chaos in his soul. "The curse ends here, one way or another." Lucien stepped forward. "You don't understand the power you're fighting. The Order's bond isn't just blood. It's eternal. Destroy the villa, and you risk unleashing what we've held back for centuries." Adrian met his gaze. "Better to face the darkness than live in its shadow." Flames erupted as Adrian lit the first torch, the fire spreading quickly through the dry, ancient wood. The villa groaned and cracked, as if in pain. Shadows twisted and writhed along the walls, the air thick with whispers of the past. Vivian screamed as the fire neared, but her voice was caught in the raging storm. Adrian raced back to her side, breaking her restraints with trembling hands. "We're getting out," he promised. But as they fled, the floor beneath them trembled violently. From the depths, a monstrous howl echoed, a sound that was neither human nor beast. Elise's presence surged through the villa like a living nightmare, feeding on the flames, growing stronger. Lucien appeared, blocking their path, his expression torn. "The villa demands a guardian. Without one, it will consume everything. Adrian's eyes locked with his cousin's. I won't be the sacrifice. If the villa wants a guardian, it will have to take me on my terms. The firestorm raged, the villa collapsing in on itself. Adrian and Vivian barely escaped as the ground shook and walls crumbled. But when the smoke cleared, only silence remained. Weeks later, the town whispered of the villa's fiery destruction, a final chapter to a dark legacy. But Adrian was nowhere to be found. Some said he'd perished in the flames. Others believed he'd become the villa's new guardian, bound forever to the shadows he fought so hard to destroy. And deep beneath the ashes, something stirred. The curse was not gone. It had merely found its next heir.